We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 84 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swaddling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, Dan. I mean, and as we record this, I'm facing the sudden shock of a 5-day working week, having come to the end of our little run of bank holidays in the UK. But yeah, other than that, very well. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Yeah, I can see this all being a bit of a shock to me as well. It's a bit confusing as to the last few weeks. I've not known what day of the week it was, and some people would say that that's no change there, but it seemed different for me anyway. Well, we're delighted to be joined today by Tony Brown. Tony was recently announced as the Libertarian Party UK candidate to take on Sadiq Khan in next year's election to be the Mayor of London. Tony, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Good evening to all of you.
So, Mike, I think we've got some questions for our guest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tony, welcome to the podcast. We do know a little bit about you. We've managed to find out you were a former councillor in Ealing. You were a political advisor to the European Parliament. But maybe touching on those and beyond that, could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, with pleasure. I perhaps begin by saying that I read history at Cambridge University, and a lot of my attitudes and thinking was molded by that reading. And the degree was a pretty flexible one, so it wasn't totally historical. You know, I read thinkers, and the thinker that particularly chimed with me was Adam Smith. And I'm a great believer in the importance of the wealth of nations as a guide and as a starting point to understand how economies work and how they can become prosperous.
And what's been your political I'll call it career. Maybe it is a career to date, but
well, if it was a career, it wasn't a particularly successful one in certain respects. I joined the Conservative Party actually at university, and I was a very long-standing member for 2 or 3 decades. I was a Conservative councillor in Ealing for the 12 years from 1994 to 2006, representing the Ealing Common Ward, which is quite well known because the North Circular Road runs across the Common. I was also a Conservative parliamentary candidate a couple of times, once for Lincoln in 1997, where I fought the parliamentary seat, and once for the European Parliament in 1994, where I fought under the old first past the post system, the seat of Staffordshire West and Congleton. I was not elected in either place. And later on, the party decided that I didn't really fit the changing requirements to be one of their promoted candidates. I suspect I was too Oxbridge, too male, too middle class, too old. I don't fit into any minority category. The disillusionment that they had with me was matched by mine with them. After I'd ceased to be a Conservative councillor in 2006, I began looking around for a new home, and a good friend of mine was David Campbell-Bannerman, who'd joined UKIP, and David effectively promoted my entry into UKIP. And working for the group in the European Parliament, of which UKIP was a part, Nigel Farage's group, the Europe of Freedom and Democracy, I worked in the European Parliament as a policy and political advisor for the 10 years from 2010 to 2020.
Well, you've moved on from both the Conservatives and UKIP, and obviously you're now standing to be Mayor of London for the Libertarian Party. What made you choose the Libertarian Party?
Actually, I've always really been libertarian in my views. And one of the reasons I fell out with the Tories was that they weren't libertarian enough for me. And when I began talking to Nigel, it was clear that certainly privately, when you began to understand what he actually believed, there was a large libertarian element to Nigel's approach and thinking. So it was a relatively easy transition. And then when I ceased to work in the European Parliament and effectively became completely free to choose the political party that most closely aligned with my personal beliefs, although it's tiny, and I know many people don't even know that it exists, it was the UK Libertarian Party, whose press officer is in fact my old European parliamentary colleague, Martin Day.
Oh, excellent. So a small party they are indeed. I think that's fair to say. We went to their conference a couple of years back, well, probably even a few years now back, pre-COVID, but rather a good event. Now, I believe you were at their conference this weekend. How did that go?
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was a small gathering. I'm not going to say anything different from that. I was, in fact, one of the speakers, and I was invited to suggest the approach that I think the party should take and what I think it should be saying in London. And to sum that up in a single sentence or two, I think I'm totally opposed to net zero, the net zero targets. I believe that the targets are irrational. They will impoverish us. They will reduce the standard of living of Londoners and indeed the entire country. And they won't even save the planet, though what they will do is help China.
Indeed, yeah. I won't find a lot of argument here on that. And I guess that probably ties into my next question then. Obviously, a really big issue within the purview of the mayor here in Croydon, and I think a lot of London, outer London boroughs, is ULEZ, but also low traffic neighbourhoods and some of the other effects like that. What's your position on ULEZ? Would you be elected mayor?
I am totally opposed to the ULEZ expansion. I believe that there is no scientific case for it. I do not believe that it is about clean air. I think that Sadiq Khan has, the kindest thing I can say is cherry-picked his scientific evidence to support the conclusions that he's drawn for non-scientific reasons. And were I in a position to, I would suspend it immediately and scrap it in the longer term.
No, so I think that ties into the view of a lot of people in outer London like ourselves. Obviously, beyond that, policing's a responsibility for the mayor. How do you feel Sadiq Khan's doing currently in terms of his role of policing London, and what would you do differently?
Right, I am actually very concerned about the way London is policed, because I don't think they use their resources for the right things. I may be a bit old-fashioned in this, but you see, the things that I think matter are theft, assault, and stopping people going about their ordinary day-to-day business of living, earning a living, and so on. So I would set the police priorities as dealing with proper crimes, crimes of assault, assault and battery, crimes of theft, crimes of blocking roads and stopping the operation of the underground system and so on. As you'll gather, I have no sympathy with the so-called eco-warriors, who I think are self-indulgent, will achieve nothing but damaging the lives of ordinary Londoners. And I therefore would point the police in the direction of what I can only characterize as a really quite traditional approach to policing the things that I think are genuine crimes which matter and damage the quality of life in London.
So, Tony, we've talked a bit there about ULEZ, but the Mayor has a wider responsibility for transport in London and TfL itself. How would you manage that differently if you were Mayor?
Right. My belief is that you want London to work from a transport point of view. And that means that you want public transport which runs properly, as close to on time as is possible. But I also believe that it means you want free-flowing roads, and you don't want cars to be stuck in endless traffic jams. The problem, one of the things that nobody will recognize is that actually air pollution from vehicles is made so much worse by vehicles that are standing idle, not moving, stuck in jams and so on. So actually, my goal of free-flowing traffic is a clean air goal. Now, what that means in practice is that I would make the investment in road improvements which make traffic flow more easily. I oppose these sort of zones that block logical local traffic. I think that the whole direction of Sadiq Khan's transport policy is actually wrong, and I want to see what I could do to make London's traffic and its public transport flow as freely and smoothly as possible, and that would be my goal.
Yeah, it's interesting you should talk about the free flow of traffic. Certainly in the southern part of Croydon, we've noticed the installation of cycle lanes with bollards, which basically make it much more difficult for traffic to flow. So you get more congestion, and presumably that's not good for the air quality in the area.
No, I mean, there is a sort of intellectual incoherence about a lot of what Sadiq Khan says. He says he wants cleaner air, but he puts in place lots of measures which in fact make air quality worse, and bollards cutting through routes, all that kind of thing, forcing people to drive round in longer journeys, so spend more time in their cars. All of that, ironically enough, makes London air quality worse, not better.
Well, housing and planning are big issues in Croydon and in other parts of London. What do you think can be done better?
Right. This is a really interesting issue, because again, Sadiq Khan shows that he is economically illiterate. He has proposed, and he wants, a rent freeze in London. Now, if you know any economic history, every rent freeze there has ever been, every fixing of prices at a set level reduces the supply. That is because the people who are supplying the product, whether it's housing or something else, say, well, we can't make a decent return, so we're not going to do it at all. So the Labour approach to housing, as set out by Sadiq Khan, is, if you understand even the most basic economics, it doesn't fit with supply and demand. Actually, the Conservatives aren't much better, because Michael Gove is putting through what he calls a rent reform bill, But actually, that has the same similar effects. It will make life more difficult, more expensive for landlords, and landlords will respond by getting out of the market. So what we witness is the absolutely unbelievable situation where both the major parties are saying that there's a shortage of housing and a shortage of rental property, but are putting in place policies, the effect of which is to drive up rents and reduce the amount of rental housing available.
So what would you do? Would you just deregulate the market?
No, I want people to be able to rent their rooms out easily. I think that's the best way to maximize the amount of housing in London. I would therefore look at all the things that we could do which would encourage private rentals. I also think that there is a lot of former commercial property across London, which is never going to be brought back into commercial use. And therefore, I'm really quite sympathetic to the idea of taking commercial buildings, rezoning them as residential, and allowing them to be turned into some of the housing of which there is a desperate shortage in London at prices that people can afford. Another small thing of mine is that obviously, having worked in the European Parliament, I've spent a lot of time in Brussels. Now, one of the things they do in Belgium is that they allow the development of car parks in the basement of buildings. There are far more basement car parks in Brussels than there are in London. And actually, I think that allowing the development of basic car parks, obviously they've got to be properly constructed. You can't do this badly, and they've got to have a sensible access ramp, and there are only some places you can do that. But where you can do that, I would encourage the amount of parking in London, because that's what people need, and it takes cars off the streets and makes people's life actually easier.
Next year's election will use the first past the post system rather than the supplementary vote system that's been used in previous mayoral elections. So previously one could perhaps use one's first vote for the people we most support, but ultimately it generally will come down to those top two, which are generally the Conservatives and the Labour Party, as we've seen in mayoral elections before. So the Conservatives are going to say a vote for anyone else will be a wasted vote and will just help to keep Khan in office. How would you counter that argument?
It is an argument which makes sense, and I'm not going to deny that. Though I would say that the distance, the policy distance, as I've illustrated with housing, between the Conservatives and Labour is far, far less than the Conservatives would like you to believe. And unless the Conservative mayoral candidate gives the same cast iron commitment that I have about the ULEZ extension, about suspending it on day one and then abolishing it as soon as he or she can, then actually the argument falls down, because there's no difference, or very little difference, between the Conservatives and Labour. The other point, however, is that I'm also planning and hoping to stand as number one on the UK Libertarian Party list for the London Assembly. I've discussed it with the Libertarian Party. We are hoping to put up a full slate for the London Assembly, not for the directly elected part, but for the list part. And what I would say to people is, okay, I understand that you might provided he or she gives the right guarantees, you might want to cast your actual vote for mayor for the Conservatives. But that doesn't mean I can't put across the arguments. It doesn't mean I can't set out my beliefs. And those people can also vote for me on the assembly list. And I would be completely delighted if I were able to get elected to the London Assembly as a former Ealing councillor. I know quite a bit about being an elected London politician. And I would then use my position in the Assembly, if I were lucky enough to get there, to advance all the arguments that you've been hearing from me. And I can assure you, I would be the most trenchant possible critic of what both Labour and Conservative are doing, particularly if they over the ULEZ, where I frankly don't trust the Conservatives to deliver.
Well, certainly getting elected to the Assembly via the list system is plausible. It's been done before by other small parties, UKIP and the Greens and what have you in the past. So it's certainly been done. Well, without giving away any secrets, how are you planning to campaign across London?
I'm simply planning to make myself available as much as I can. I think I will be the first ever UK Libertarian Party candidate to turn up to hustings and things like that. I will, a bit like my old boss, Nigel Farage, any invitation to speak is welcome, and I will turn up to talk, set out my views, and so on. I'm also hoping that we can produce at least one piece of literature which goes to everybody, which will give some idea of what the party stands for and what I stand for, because I'm totally realistic. I know that if you stopped a whole series of Londoners in the street and said, have you ever heard of the UK Libertarian Party? I'm sure at least 9 out of 10 of them would say no.
So obviously you've set out your stall there, and you're looking to campaign across London and to have a slate of candidates on the London-wide list. How can people get involved in your campaign then?
The easiest way is to go to the UK Libertarian Party website and register your support there, and send them an email or something, and you can start being involved with them via the website. In time, I hope that we can sort of begin to develop things so that there will be an email address that people can easily reach me on, that sort of thing, and WhatsApp and so on. It's very early days. The election's still a year or so away. So start with the party site, but in time, we hope to make it much easier for people.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing more about your campaign over the next year.
Well, thank you for inviting me to participate in this podcast, because it's exactly the sort of invitation that I really appreciate, because it enables me to talk to people who won't have come across me before. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, Mike, we've got an event coming up.
We do indeed. On Wednesday, the 21st of June, we have our regular third Wednesday drinks at the George in Croydon from 7 p.m. So that's 7 p.m, George in Croydon, Wednesday, the 21st of June. We hope to see you there.
Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter @CroydonConst, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. Well, thank you to Tony for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Stay free, everybody.